where we left off last Thursday. Should be in chapter 12, Silver and Opals, which is should be around page 237. If you remember, we didn't talk about it much, but if you remember, when Harry went to Diagon Alley, he saw Malfoy, and he followed him into Borgin and Burke's, sorry, and saw him try to buy something, and he thought Malfoy would try to smuggle this thing, whatever it was, into Hogwarts. He finds out that because of the dark detectors that were used over the students when they first got to school, Malfoy couldn't have smuggled something in. Okay? So we pick up in this chapter Silver and Opals. And we hear Harry, Ron, and Hermione talking about Harry's textbook for the potions class that he got out of the cupboard because he didn't buy his own at the bookstore. And we're told around page 240, Harry makes the comment to Hermione, what does it matter if it's handwritten? That is, he's using this potions textbook that has all kinds of spells and potions handwritten in it. That is beyond what is actually published in the book. And Harry asks, what does it matter if it's handwritten? Hermione, because it's probably not Ministry of Magic approved. And also, because I'm starting to think this Prince character was a bit dodgy. Who was their Defense Against Dark Arts teacher the previous year? Umbridge. What did Umbridge say everything she was teaching them was? Ministry approved. Okay? So it almost sounds like Hermione is suggesting here, well, if it's not ministry approved, then they shouldn't be learning it, shouldn't be doing it. Okay? Harry and Ron shout her down, and Ron says, it was a laugh, just a laugh, Hermione, that's all. What's he talking about? What happened the previous night? Hermione, dangling people upside down by the ankle? Who puts their time and energy into making up spells like that? Well, where did we see that? Quidditch World Cup. Okay. Ron says, well, Fred and George, Harry, my dad. Harry's remembering when he goes into Snape's memory, seeing Snape dangled upside down by his ankle. And then Harry says, my dad used the spell. And then he lies. Lupin told me. Because he can't tell them what he saw in Snape's memory. Hermione, maybe your dad did use it, Harry, but he's not the only one. We've seen a whole bunch of people use it, in case you've forgotten. Dangling people in the air, making them float along, asleep, helpless. Okay? Notice she doesn't come right out and kind of hit him over the face with at the Quidditch World Cup. She's leaving that for Harry to kind of remember. With a sinking feeling, he too remembered the behavior of the Death Eaters. Harry, that was different. Was it? They were abusing it. This is wrong. Harry and his dad were just having a laugh. Well, what were the Death Eaters doing? Just having a laugh. At whose expense? Somebody else. Okay? Harry and his dad were just having a laugh. At whose expense? Neville's? Snape's? You don't like the prince, Hermione, says Ron, because he's better than you at potions. It's got nothing to do with that. Notice as her cheeks redden. In other words, bullseye, Ron. Okay? I just think it's very irresponsible to start performing spells when you don't even know what they're for. Now, She's right there. Notice the spells don't come, they're not like ingredients of a cake. You know, where it says at the top, I don't know, applesauce cake. And then you get the ingredients, what to do. What Harry's reading in his spell book, in the handwritten spells, are just kind of the motions, the words, the movement. He's not being told what these things do. How do we know? He uses a spell later on, sectum sempra. It just comes out of his mouth. And yet what does it do? He nearly kills Malfoy with it. Once he realizes what he's done, he's like, oh my God, oh my God. And stop talking about the prince as if it's his title. I bet it's just a stupid nickname. Doesn't seem as though he's a very nice person to me. Harry, I don't see where you get that from. That is, how could you say he's not a nice person just from the basis of what he writes in a book? If he'd been a budding Death Eater, he wouldn't have been boasting about being half-blood, would he? Well, doesn't that depend? Because the half-blood can be taken to mean what? Half good blood. Right? Half wizarding blood. It's the other blood that he doesn't really count. And even as he said it, Harry remembered his father did pure blood, but he pushed the thought out of his mind. He would worry about that later. Death Eaters can't all be pure blood. There aren't enough pure blood wizards left, says Hermione. I expect most of them are half-bloods pretending to be pure. It's only Muggleborns they hate. They'd be quite happy to let you and Ron join up. Ron, there's no way they'd let me be a Death Eater. Okay? Skip on a little bit. They walk on into Hogsmeade. They go into Honeydukes, which is warm. And Ron, and this is the first time, if I remember correctly, this is the first time we see this phrase in the novels. Thank God. Okay? Now, does Ron literally mean like he's falling down on his knees and clasping his hands together? Thank you, God. No, it's an expression. But it's the first time we see the expression in the novels. From here on out, we're going to start seeing it a lot more, especially in Book 7. And in Book 7, it's more than just an expression. It is literally a thanks to God. Okay? So they go into Honeydukes, they see Slughorn, and they leave. I'm going to skip that part. We see what happens to Katie Bell. Harry tries to help her, etc. They get McGonagall, and Harry blames Malfoy for whatever has happened to Katie Bell. They know about the pearls and the opal necklace and such, but they don't know how Katie Bell got it. Okay? And Harry's going on and on about Malfoy. And page 241, probably 255 or so, Hermione says Harry Malfoy wasn't even in Hogsmeade. How can Malfoy be responsible for what happened to Katie Bell when he wasn't even there? Harry must have used an accomplice. Now, notice, we're going to find out. Harry is right. Malfoy is responsible for this. Okay? Who's the accomplice? Madame Rosmerta. Why? Because she's put under an imperious curse. Go on to chapter 13, the secret riddle. Katie goes off to St. Mungo's. Okay, news is spread around school. And Harry has another lesson with Dumbledore. It's, around page 260 or so. And Dumbledore says, as they're in his office, "You will remember, I am sure, that we left the tale of Lord Voldemort's beginnings at the point where the handsome muggle Tom Riddle had abandoned his witch wife Maripe and returned to his family home in Little Hangleton. Maripe was left alone in London, expecting the baby who would one day become Lord Voldemort." Okay? So, she's been abandoned. Tom Riddle's left her. Harry, how do you know she was in London? Because of the evidence of one Caractacus Burke of Borgin and Burke's. Okay? And so Harry sees the thought in the pensive, and he sees that Maripe sold Slytherin's locket for 10 galleons to Caractacus Burke. And Harry says, he only gave her 10 galleons. Caractacus Burke was not famed for his generosity. So we know that near the end of her pregnancy, Maripe was alone in London, desperate need of gold, desperate enough to sell her one and only valuable possession, the locket that was one of Marvolo's treasured family heirlooms. Harry, but she could do magic, right? If she could do magic, then she shouldn't want for anything. She should be able to solve all her problems. As Harry puts it, she could have got food and everything for herself by magic, couldn't she? Dumbledore, perhaps she could. But it's my belief, again I'm guessing, that when her husband abandoned her, Maripe stopped using magic. Why? Dumbledore says because she didn't want to be a witch any longer. Why did Tom Riddle leave her? Because she was a witch. So she stops using magic because she just wants to be human. Why? Probably in hopes that he would love her again, even though the only reason he loved her before was apparently because of a love potion. Dumbledore goes on, however. Of course, it's also possible that her unrequited love and the attendant despair sapped her of her powers. That can happen. So notice, unrequited love and despair can take a wizard or witch's powers away from them. What do both of those have? Or what do both of those involve? Unrequited love and despair. What connects the two of those? Remember the Sorting Hat song? The Sorting Hat talked about when Slytherin left, he left Hogwarts what? Downhearted. And what he means by that is brokenhearted. What lies at the both of despair and unrequited love is the heart. The heart. Hope comes from the heart. It doesn't come from the mind. Love comes from the heart. Harry, she couldn't even stay alive for her son. Maripe, Dumbledore had just said, Maripe refused to raise her wand even to save her own life. Harry, she wouldn't even stay alive for her son? Dumbledore raises his eyebrows. Could you possibly be feeling sorry for Lord Voldemort? No, said Harry quickly. Why is it important that Harry says this quickly?
He doesn't stop and think about it.
He doesn't stop and think about it. Exactly right. It's a spur-of-the-moment response. Why? Louder.
He doesn't want to.
He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to feel sorry. Or, use another word, pity for Lord Voldemort. Because if he feels pity for Lord Voldemort, what does that mean? Voldemort is no longer what? To use Frodo's language. Only an enemy. If Harry feels pity for Voldemort, then what does that suggest? That maybe Voldemort's not entirely in the wrong. That is, maybe Voldemort is a little bit among the wronged. Okay? But maybe Voldemort never had an experience of love. No, said Harry, but she had a choice, didn't she? Not like my mother. What do you mean Harry's mother didn't have a choice? Step aside, you silly girl, Voldemort says to her. What does that mean? You can step aside and I can attempt to kill your son and you can live. Or you can not. What's he offering her? A choice. Dumbledore, your mother had a choice. Yes, Maripe Riddle chose death, in spite of a son who needed her. But do not judge her too harshly, Harry. She was greatly weakened by long suffering. She never had your mother's courage. But what else does he mean by don't judge her too harshly? What did Maripe experience that Harry hasn't experienced?
Broken heart.
Broken heart? Think of Maripe's life at home.
Yeah, her father was kind of a dick.
Okay? Compare that with the Dursleys. The Dursleys are bad. Are they anything compared to Marvolo Gaunt? No. No. That's why Dumbledore says, don't judge her too harshly. She was greatly weakened by long suffering. Has Harry been weakened by long suffering? To some extent. But what did it do to Harry as opposed to Maripe? It made him stronger. Okay? But then, the Dursleys weren't Harry's parents. It didn't make him stronger while he was living with them. It made him stronger when? Only once he got to Hogwarts. Only once he learned about his real parents, his real family, his real heritage, his real, you could even say, go to book 5, destiny. Okay? And she never had your mother's courage. So, Harry asks, where are we going? Dumbledore says, this time you're going to go into one of my memories. So they go into Dumbledore's memory. And what do we see? We see a much younger Dumbledore showing up at the orphanage. And notice the name of the woman who runs the orphanage that young Tom Marvolo Riddle is raised at. Okay. He's essentially born and then given to the orphanage. What's her name? Cole. What does it suggest? Look at the different spelling of the word. C-O-A-L. Dark, hard, cold. Notice her name isn't Mrs. Love, Mrs. Flower, Mrs. Pansy, Mrs. Pick your bright, sunny, fluffy, wonderful, inviting thing. Mrs. Bunny, you know. It's cold. It's uncaring. It's unforgiving. So, Dumbledore goes in, he talks to Mrs. Cole. He tells her about the school that he has, that Tom has a place at it if he wants it. He gives her a piece of paper and waves his wand. Why is he waving his wand? Page 262. So that essentially she goes along with what he wants. Okay? And he's talking to Mrs. Cole, and Dumbledore asked her on page 263, did she say anything before she died? That is Maripe Riddle. Anything about the boy's father? And she says, now as it happens, she did. I remember she said to me, I hope he looks like his papa. And I won't lie, she was right to hope, because she was no beauty. And then she told me he was to be named Tom for his father, and Marvolo for her father. Yes, I know, funny name, isn't it? We wondered whether she came from a circus, and she said the boy's surname was to be Riddle, and she died soon after that without another word. So we named him just as she'd said. But no Tom nor Marvolo ever came looking for him, nor any family at all. In other words, he was what? Abandoned. What happened to Harry? Wasn't he kind of abandoned? He was left on a basket on a doorstep. Okay? Yeah, there was a letter with him. And then she says, he's a funny boy. Dumbledore, I thought he might be. She talks about him being a funny baby. She talks about accidents and incidents that have occurred. Okay? So Dumbledore goes and meets young Tom Riddle. And notice what we immediately see about him. He's immediately skeptical. He's immediately questioning. Professor? Is that like doctor? What are you here for? Did she get you in to have a look at me? Dumbledore, no, I'm smiling. I don't believe you. She wants me looked at, doesn't she? Tell the truth! He spoke the last three words with a ringing force that was almost shocking. It was a command, and it sounded as though he had given it many times before. His eyes had widened. He was glaring at Dumbledore. Who are you? Dumbledore says, I've told you. Okay? You're from the asylum, aren't you? Okay. And Dumbledore tells him, the school I'm from is a school of magic. Magic? That's right. What can I do? What is it that you can do? All sorts. And he kind of says some things. And so Dumbledore has to prove he can do magic, turns the wardrobe on fire, and then turns it back off, etc. Tom Riddle wants to know where he can get a wand. Dumbledore says, all in good time. But he says, before you can come to Hogwarts, he makes Tom Riddle open his little box of goodies, his trophies, the things he has stolen. Tips them onto the bed. And Dumbledore says, you will return them to their owners with your apologies. I shall know whether it has been done. Thieving is not tolerated at Hogwarts. What is Dumbledore attempting to do with the young Tom Riddle? Put him on the right path. He's attempting to instill some sense of values, of a proper moral code. Riddle did not look remotely abashed. That is, he wasn't ashamed at all. At last he says in a colorless voice, yes, sir. What does the colorless voice mean?
He's only saying it just...
Exactly. There's no conviction. There's no sincerity. Dumbledore, at Hogwarts will teach you not only to use magic, but to control it. You have been using your powers in a way that is neither taught nor tolerated out of school. You are not the first, nor will you be the last, to allow your magic to run away with you. Notice, you can become, if you don't practice self-control, you can become what to your magic?
Prisoner.
A prisoner to it, enslaved to it, where it controls you. But you should know, Hogwarts can expel students, and the Ministry of Magic, yes, there is one, will punish lawbreakers still more severely. You must accept these laws and abide by them. Yes, sir. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. That is, was he really acknowledging them? Okay. Dumbledore essentially says you don't need to worry about books. There's a fund at school for those who require assistance. In other words, like scholarships. So you don't have to be rich to go to Hogwarts. Okay? Dumbledore essentially says, I can accompany you to Diagon Alley. Tom Riddle just says, no, I'm used to doing things myself. How do you get to this place? Dumbledore tells him. And he says, ask for Tom, the barman, at the Leaky Cauldron. Riddle kind of twitches. You dislike the name Tom? There are a lot of Toms. Then, as though he could not suppress the question, as though it burst from him in spite of himself, he asked, was my father a wizard? He was called Tom Riddle too. Dumbledore, I'm afraid I don't know. Notice that's a lie. My mother can't have been magic. Well, take that back. It might not have been a lie when Dumbledore actually went, when Tom Riddle was 11 years old. It's a lie definitely at the age Dumbledore is in Book 6. My mother can't have been magic. Or she wouldn't have died. Okay? Notice what Tom Riddle assumes. Magic can do what? Yeah, pretty much. Magic can make you immortal. Magic can stop death. If you die, you can't be magical. It must have been him. So when I've got all my stuff, when do I come to this Hogwarts? Dumbledore says all that information's in your envelope. Notice Dumbledore doesn't, in the memory, correct him. Now, Tom, you need to understand. Just because you're magic doesn't mean that you live forever. Doesn't do that at all. All right? So, Harry and Dumbledore come back out of the pensive. Harry sits down and says, wow, he believed it much quicker than I did. I mean, that he was a wizard. Dumbledore, yep. He was perfectly ready to believe that he was special. Harry, did you know then? Know that I just met the most dangerous dark wizard of all time? No. Had no idea he was to grow up to be what he is. He says, but I was intrigued by him. I returned to Hogwarts, kept an eye on him. His powers, as you heard, were surprisingly well developed for such a young wizard. And he had already discovered he had some measure of control over them and begun to use them. And as you saw, they were not the random experiments typical of young wizards. He was already using magic against other people to frighten, to punish, to control. The little stories of the strangled rabbit and the young boy and girl he lured into a cave are most suggestive. I can make them hurt if I wanted to. Doesn't mean that he's using like a Cruciatus curse on him. It just means he's figured out ways to instill pain in other people. Harry, and he was a Parselmouth. Dumbledore, yes, indeed, a rare ability. One supposedly connected with the dark arts. Though, as we know, there are Parselmouths among the great and good too, which is kind of an interesting statement because never in the 7 novels are we told Who among the great and good were also parcel mouths? Other than Harry. The only other named parcel mouth is Voldemort in Slytherin. Okay? So, Dumbledore kind of wants to emphasize the main points of this lesson. You notice his reaction to the name Tom. Harry nods. So, he showed contempt for anything that tied him to other people, anything that made him ordinary. In other words, he already has an elevated view of himself. Okay? What else? You've already noticed that he was self-sufficient, secretive, and friendless. He didn't want companionship or help. Right? And Dumbledore goes on and says, we'll hear his Death Eaters refer to themselves that they are his friends. They are deluded. Lord Voldemort has never had a friend, nor do I believe has he ever wanted one. Why? Why has he never wanted a friend?
He has trust issues.
Okay, trust. What else?
Maybe he thinks it makes people weak, like having those.
Makes you weak, makes you vulnerable. What else? What are friends to you?
People care about.
People you can care about, people you can trust.
Family.
Family.
Equals.
They're equals. Does he have, his mind, any equals? No. And lastly, young Tom Riddle liked to collect trophies. You saw the box of stolen articles? What does this also, she never discusses this in the novel, or in the novels, but I'm bringing it up. What does this also connect him to? What kind of people in society like to collect trophies? And I don't mean like hunting trophies or sports trophies. Let me put it this way. What kind of dangerous people in society like to collect trophies?
Serial killers.
Yeah. Serial killers. Almost all of them, to a T, will keep something from the people they kill. They'll take something away as a memento, a reminder of their power over that person or over that individual. Okay? Harry gets up, gets ready to leave, and he notices the table that Marvolo Gaunt's ring was on before. The ring's not there. Harry, the ring's gone. Very astute, Harry. Okay. Chapter 14, Felix Felicis. Felix Felicis is a good luck potion. Right? And in this chapter, we see where Hermione thinks Harry gives it to Ron to help Ron win the Quidditch game. He doesn't actually use it. About page 287 or so. Harry, Ron, and Ginny are kind of in an argument. It's really Ron and Ginny that are in an argument because Ginny and Dean Thomas have been making out. Ron's upset about that. Ron pulls out his wand to curse Ginny. Harry steps swiftly between them. Ron roars, "You don't know what you're talking about," trying to get a clear shot at Ginny around Harry, who's now standing in front of her with his arms outstretched, like a cross. Just because I don't do it in public, meaning he doesn't make out in public like Ginny does, etc. Okay, keep going on. I think, in fact, we're going to skip most of it. Yeah, we're going to skip pretty much the rest of this chapter. So Ron does win the Quidditch match. Go on to chapter 15, the Unbreakable Vow. Actually, I think we're going to skip just all of this one too. Harry's at Slughorn's party. This is about page 317 or so. And he sees Slughorn. Harry's invited Luna to this party. He sees Slughorn, and Slughorn says, actually, Trelawney says, when she sees Harry, "My dear boy, the rumors, the stories, the chosen one. Of course, I've known for a very long time the omens were never good, Harry. Blah, 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 blah." And then Slughorn comes in, and he talks a little bit about Harry, but he segues into talking about Harry's mom. He says, "Ah, Sybil, we all think our subject's most important. That is, she thinks divination is, Slughorn thinks potions is. But I don't think I've ever known such a natural at potions. Instinctive, you know, like his mother. We've never been told before that Lily was good at potions. We've always been told she's good at charms. But notice the connection. Who has been Harry's potions teacher every year except this one? Snape. Snape is a master at potions. I've only ever taught a few with this kind of ability. I can tell you that, Sybil. Why, even Severus, and notice what he's just done. In this short conversation, he's linked Severus with Lily. Okay? And he sees Snape, and he kind of wrangles Snape into the conversation. And Snape's like, "Potter? Has ability? Psh, you got to be kidding me." Okay? So Snape asks Harry what other Slughorn asks Harry what other subjects he's taking. So in addition to potions, Harry says defense against the dark arts, charms, transfiguration, herbology, and Snape finishes all the subjects required for an auror. Harry, yeah, well, it's what I'd like to be. Okay. Harry leaves, and he goes outside, and he sees Snape looking at Malfoy, as though both angry and a little afraid. And then Harry stares at Malfoy, about page 322. It was not the sucking up that intrigued him. That is, Malfoy's always sucked up to Snape. He'd watched Malfoy do that to Snape for a long time. It was the fact that Malfoy did, after all, look a little ill. This was the first time he'd seen Malfoy close up for ages. He now saw that Malfoy had dark shadows under his eyes and a distinctly grayish tinge to his skin. So Snape says he wants to speak with Malfoy, and Harry goes off and spies on them. Okay? And Harry overhears Malfoy and Snape talking, and Snape saying, "I'd like to help you. Your plan isn't working, or your plans haven't worked." And at the bottom of about 323, or somewhere on 323, Snape says, "I'm trying to help you. I swore to your mother I would protect you. I made the unbreakable vow, Draco. Looks like you'll have to break it then, because I don't need your protection." Now, Draco knows what an unbreakable vow is. So what's he saying when he says, "looks like you'll have to break it"? Guess you're going to have to die then. It's my job. He gave it to me, and I'm doing it. I've got a plan. It's going to work. Just taking a bit longer than I thought. What is your plan? None of your business. If you tell me what you're trying to do, I can assist you. Okay? He mentions Crabbe and Goyle. And Snape's like, if you're relying on the brains of Malfoy, and the brains of Crabbe and Goyle, they're not the only ones. I've got other people. Bottom of, or somewhere in 324. Then why not confide in me, and I can And notice what Malfoy says. I know what you're up to. You want to steal my glory. And Harry goes off. Okay? So he tells Ron and Hermione, in very beginning of that next chapter, first page, Harry asks, what happens if you break it? Meaning the unbreakable vow. You die, says Ron. Fred and George tried to get me to make one when I was about 5. I nearly did, too. How could they have done that? Isn't an unbreakable vow somewhat advanced magic, and it requires a wand? When I was about 5, I nearly did, too. I was holding hands with Fred and everything when Dad found us. He went mental. Okay? Let's skip a bunch. Picking up right around 3:31. Harry's talking to Mr. Weasley about what he had talked to him about before he left for school, about that Malfoy was trying to sneak something into the school, okay, and about the Malfoys hiding dark objects. And tells him about Snape and Malfoy. And Mr. Weasley says, has it occurred to you, Harry, that Snape was simply pretending? Harry, pretending to offer help so that he could find out what Malfoy's up to? Yeah, I thought you'd say that. But how do we know? What does Harry mean? How do we know? How do we know what? Yeah, or that Snape's on their side. That's what's troubling Harry. How do we know Snape is really good? How do we know Snape is a member of the Order of the Phoenix? Okay. Look at Weasley's response. It isn't our business to know. Sorry, Lupin's response. It isn't our business to know. It's Dumbledore's business. Dumbledore trusts Severus. And that ought to be good enough for all of us. Okay? What's Lupin saying? Who's the leader of the Order of the Phoenix? Dumbledore. This is his army. Okay. The Order of the Phoenix is Dumbledore's army. So, Lupin says, Dumbledore trusts Snape, therefore, we should trust Snape. What is he saying about their trust in Dumbledore? Okay. What is it akin to? What is it similar to?
That he can't be wrong.
Not doubting.
Louder.
Devotion.
Devotion. It's faith. They have faith in Dumbledore. Okay? Notice what Lupin said again. It isn't our business to know. So what is it their business to do? To believe. They can't know how or why Snape is good. Therefore, they can only believe that Snape is good. Why? Because they place complete, perfect, whole, total trust in Dumbledore. Does Dumbledore know the reasons? Yes. Do we discover those reasons at the end of book 6? No. We don't discover that until the end of book 7. And all of book 7 is ultimately about one theme. What does Harry believe? What does he believe? Does he believe in the Dumbledore that he knew for 6 years?
No.
He's full of doubt all throughout book 7. Or does he believe in the Dumbledore that he's read about in Rita Skeeter's articles? In other words, does he believe his experience or what he reads? What other people say. Okay? This is the first instance where Harry brings up this idea of how do we know? In philosophy, this is called epistemology. This is the branch of philosophy. How do we know what we know? Okay? One school of thought says we know what we know based on empirical evidence. That is, what we get through our senses. How do I know this door is real? If I try to walk into it, it stops me. And I can't. Okay. And there are various other schools and such. Lupin, it's not our business to know. In other words, Lupin seems to be saying, we, as Harry, can't know. It's impossible to know. Let's bring this outside the book, bring it into a real world situation. And I don't care what God you may talk about. Can you prove God exists? No. Why? Because, let's say the Christian God. If you use the terms of the debate of what the Christian God is, he's what? He's outside human experience. He's outside or beyond the universe. There's no way you can test that proposition. Okay? Which is why it becomes belief. Similarly, the flip side of that equation is, can you prove God does not exist? No. That is just as much a belief. An atheist has just as much faith as a believer. It's just a belief in something else. A belief in the opposite. Okay? But, Harry says, but, what if Dumbledore's wrong? Just say Dumbledore's wrong. People have said it many times. It comes down to whether or not you trust Dumbledore's judgment. In other words, it comes down to what? Belief. Whom do you choose to believe? Do you believe Dumbledore's judgment? And Lupin says, I do. Therefore, I trust Severus. Because I believe in Dumbledore's judgment, therefore I trust him. Does it mean he likes him? No. Okay. Harry, but Dumbledore can make mistakes. He says it himself all the time. And he looks Lupin straight in the eye. Do you honestly like Snape? Notice what Harry is equating. Belief, or trust even, with liking. I neither like nor dislike Severus. In other words, I'm neutral, Lupin says. No, Harry. Why the no, Harry? Narrator doesn't tell us, but it's almost like Harry throws up his hands or rolls his eyes or does a physical gesture that says whatever. No, Harry, I'm speaking the truth. We shall never be bosom friends, perhaps. Why not? What kind of experience does Lupin have with Snape? His friends bullied him. After all that happened between James and Sirius and Severus, there is too much bitterness there. But I do not forget that during the year I taught at Hogwarts, Severus made the Wolfsbane potion for me every month, made it perfectly, so that I did not have to suffer as I usually do at the full moon. In other words, he could have done what? Oops, forgot one little ingredient, but he didn't. Harry, but he accidentally let it slip that you're a werewolf, so you had to leave. Lupin shrugs his shoulders. News would have leaked out anyway. We both know he wanted my job, but he could have wreaked much worse damage on me. He kept me healthy. I must be grateful. What does Lupin mean by must? Louder.
I think this was an obligation.
Yes, he is obligated to Snape now. Right? Maybe he didn't dare mess with the potion with Dumbledore watching him. Notice what Harry is doing at this point. He's coming up with reasons to hate Snape. Lupin, you are determined to hate him. What does that mean, determined?
You're trying.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, it has that determined in it. That is a end point. You've already reached the end point of deciding Snape is evil. And now all you're doing is you're kind of gathering up the reasons. In other words, he's reached this conclusion without doing what first? Coming up with the premises upon which the conclusion ought to be based. Okay? So, Lupin says, and I understand that. With James as your father, Sirius as your godfather, you have inherited an old prejudice. What has he just said about Harry? Harry, you are prejudiced. Does anybody want to be told that they're prejudiced? No. Because what does that mean? It means you have prejudged. Prejudicial. You've judged before the evidence. Okay? And he says, and with your father and your godfather, it's like, Harry, how can I blame you? By all means, tell Dumbledore what you've told Arthur and me. But don't expect him to share your view of the matter. Don't even expect him to be surprised by what you tell him. Foreshadowing. It might have been on Dumbledore's orders that Severus questioned Draco. Okay. So, let's see. Go to almost the end of that chapter, about probably around 345, maybe 344. Harry's talking with Rufus Scrimgeour. Scrimgeour has come to the Weasleys to see Harry. And he's talking to him about Harry being the chosen one. And he says, I assume you and Dumbledore have discussed these matters? Harry, yeah, we've talked about them. Okay. And what has Dumbledore told you, Harry? It's between us. Okay. Scrimgeour says, of course. And it doesn't really matter whether you're the chosen one or not, does it? Harry says, I don't really know what you mean, Minister. Well, of course, to you it will matter enormously. What does he mean by that? If you really are the one to defeat Voldemort, then yeah, it's going to matter to you an awful lot. He says, But to the wizarding community at large, it's all perception. What does he mean? It's all perception, isn't it? It's what people believe that's important. What does he mean? Let me use an example from politics, but I won't use current politics. I'll use politics a long time ago. Back in about, let's say, 1974. Beginning 1973. When Watergate was underway. The Watergate investigation. Okay, over the break-in at the DNC, the Democrat National Committee headquarters in the Watergate Hotel. Nixon came on TV and said, the people need to know their president is not a crook. It's important what they believe. What was he doing? Or what was he attempting to do? He was attempting to guide perception. Now, historically, was Nixon personally a crook? No. Nixon had nothing to do with the actual break-in of the DNC headquarters. By that I mean he didn't order it. Okay? People on his campaign team did break in. Why? They were trying to get information about the Democratic National Committee's plans. Ultimately, it's a little teeny tiny thing. It was not important. What was important, as is always the case with every single damn politician when they get in trouble, it's the cover-up. That is always more important than the initial crime, with one exception. Well, maybe a couple of exceptions. The one exception I'm thinking of is when Ted Kennedy killed a young woman. Killed. Okay. By drunk driving, crashing into a river, and leaving her in the car so that she drowned. Mary Jo Kopechne in 1968, I think it was, 68 or 69. Okay. He was responsible for her death. Her death was much more important than the little cover-up that came afterwards. Okay? But what Nixon was attempting to do was to manage perceptions. Okay? It's what people believe that's important. Now, he doesn't mean that in the same way that Lupin does when Lupin tells Harry, I trust Dumbledore, implicitly. What does Scrimgeour mean? He means the same thing Fudge means when Fudge says, when he goes to Hagrid's hut, people need to see we're doing something. Here's an example. Modern politics. Again, it might be offensive, but I don't care. President Obama announced, or his spokesman, announced a week or two ago, he's sending 50 special forces troops to Syria. Why?
To make people happy. They think he's not doing anything.
Okay, keep going. Why? Because what is ISIS doing in Syria and Iraq? Handing our asses to us on a platter. That's why. So, we're sending 50 special forces to what? Take on ISIS? No. But supposedly to help the Syrian and our allied forces. Are 50 special forces going to be a drop in the bucket? That is, what impact are 50, and these might be the 50 greatest special forces operators the United States has ever produced. How much of an impact are those 50 men going to have? None. None. Why? Because we're talking about 50 versus 10 scores of thousands. And who are they going to be training? I don't mean to denigrate the Syrian forces, but people that are not very good at their craft. How do we know that? Because ISIS controls over half of Syria. If the Syrian forces were any good, ISIS wouldn't control half of Syria, or Iraq for that matter. Okay? So it is an attempt to control perception, as opposed to reality. Look what goes on after this. Harry says nothing. He thought he saw dimly where they were heading, but he was not going to help Scrimgeour get there. That is, he's going to give Scrimgeour the rope and let him hang himself. People believe you are the chosen one, you see. They think you're quite the hero, which of course you are, Harry, chosen or not. How many times have you faced he who must not be named? Well, anyways. The point is, you are a symbol of hope for many, Harry. The idea that there is somebody out there who might even be destined to destroy you must not be named. Well, naturally, it gives people a lift. And, some people think you have a duty to stand alongside the ministry. In other words, he wants Harry to become what for the ministry? Captain America. Suit up, Harry. Go stand beside the ministry. Sell, as in Captain America, war bonds. Be seen doing your part. To do what exactly? To help the ministry so that people will do what? Believe in the government. And yet, what is the government actually doing? Squat. It's not doing really anything. Well, it published a pamphlet. All this kind of nonsense. Harry, I don't understand exactly what you want. Notice, he's going to make him spell it out. Stand alongside the ministry. What does that mean? Well, nothing onerous. I mean, if you were to be seen popping in and out of the ministry every now and then. And, maybe speak to Gavin Robards, head of the War Office. Dolores Umbridge has told me you cherish an ambition to become an Auror. What has he just said? Dolores Umbridge, who works where? At the ministry. What did she do the previous year? She tortured Harry. I must not tell lies. Harry felt anger. So basically, Harry says, you'd like to give the impression I'm working for the ministry. Well, it would get everyone a lift to think you were more involved, Harry. I mean, the chosen one, It's all about giving people hope. The feeling that exciting things are happening. It's all about giving people hope. What should hope be based upon? Facts. Truth. Okay. In other words, here, I'll use a real world example. This won't happen to anybody in here, I'm sure. I'll use my previous class, where they have 3 exams and a paper. Let's assume somebody from my previous class, comes in the week before finals. They've earned 3 Fs on their 3 papers. Do you think it's possible I can get an A in the course? Okay. Reality would say what? Not a snowball's chance in hell. Not a black chance at a KKK rally, not a white person's chance at an NAACP. I mean, no. No, absolutely not. Okay? What is Scrimger saying? Well, of course, little Johnny. You can always hope. What kind of hope is that? It's false. It's false. Okay? Hope needs to be based on reality. Harry, but if I keep running in and out of the ministry, won't that seem as though I approve of what the ministry's up to? Well, that's partly why we'd like. Harry, no, that won't work. I don't. Why? Because what has the ministry done with Stan Shunpike? They've locked him up as a Death Eater. Scrimger, I would not expect you to understand. Why? You are 16 years old. And Harry's like, yeah, and I kicked Voldemort's ass 2 years ago. Harry, Dumbledore's a lot older than 16. He doesn't think Stan should be in as commander either. You're making Stan a scapegoat. Just like you want to make me a mascot. Here's an example of what Harry's talking about. Again, I don't care what your politics are. You want to talk about a scapegoat? When our embassy in Benghazi, Libya was attacked, what did the administration say was the cause of the attack? They said it the very next day, and then proceeded to say it for 2 weeks. Susan Rice, ambassador to the UN, went on the Sunday talk shows, the Sunday after the Monday of the attack, and said on all 5 Sunday talk shows, the cause of the attack was an internet video done by a guy in California. That is, this internet video so pissed off the Muslims in Libya that they rioted. This guy was a scapegoat. This guy was actually in jail for 6 months. And yet the administration knew what? Within 2 hours after the attack began. It had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with that video. How do we know that? Because these quote-unquote rioters brought RPGs to this riot. You just don't go down to Payless and buy an RPG off the shelf. Okay? That takes planning to do that. They had mortars. You don't just go down to Walmart and buy a mortar off the shelf. Okay? Moreover, and this is what you would glean if you watched or heard or read about Hillary Clinton's testimony to the Benghazi Committee, that very evening, she sent an email to her daughter, not a public government official, by the way, sent an email to her daughter. I think it was like 1:30 in the morning. While it was still going on in Benghazi, while we still had men on the ground who were alive, she sent an email to her daughter that says, they are being attacked by terrorists. Okay? Her daughter was not a government employee. Her daughter had no right, first of all, to that information. Especially when 6 hours later, she said to the American people, this was caused by an internet video. This was a spontaneous riot. It was not a pre-planned attack. What Scrimger is doing is he's saying, come and say it was a spontaneous internet video that's launched this attack. Harry, I don't want to be used. Some would say it's your duty to be used by the ministry. Harry, yeah? And others might say it's your duty to check people who really are Death Eaters before you chuck them in prison. You're doing what Barty Crouch did. You never get it right, you people, do you? Either we've got Fudge pretending everything's lovely while people get murdered right under his nose, or we've got you doing what? chucking the wrong people into jail, and trying to pretend you got the chosen one working for you. So you're not the chosen one. Notice he latches on that. Harry, thought you said it didn't matter. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Harry, you don't care whether I live or die, but you do care that I help you convince people you're winning the war against Voldemort. And he says, I haven't forgotten. This isn't a symbol of, wizard power. He's showing the back of his hand. I don't remember you rushing to my defense when I was trying to tell everyone Voldemort was back. The ministry wasn't so keen to be pals last year. And they finished with the comment, Scrimger asks, what's Dumbledore up to? Where does he go? Harry, no idea. And you wouldn't tell me if you knew. Nope. Well, I guess you're Dumbledore's man through and through, aren't you, Potter? What does that mean? Part of his army, okay. You're Dumbledore's man through and through. You side with Dumbledore. You trust Dumbledore, as Lupin said, implicitly. In other words, Harry's going to stake everything on Dumbledore. Harry, yeah, I am. Glad we straightened that out. Okay, we'll pick up there on Tuesday. Plan to finish on Tuesday.